Alright guys, BLM here back with a new video, and in this video I am back talking about Survivor 44, where here I'll be doing my now traditional mid-season power ranking. Now like last season, this is kind of early into the season. I mean, we're assuming we're going to get 13 episodes. It's only episode 5. However, it does look like we are going to be merging next episode, which is typically the point where I like to do these videos. So let's do it. I mean, we're going to be ranking the remaining 12 players left in the game based on how likely I feel like they are to win the game, particularly based around the editing of the season. Though before that, I do want to talk about my general thoughts on the season, along with my thoughts on the players booted so far. So with that, let's talk about my general thoughts on the season, which are that it's fine. I will say I'm so far kind of underwhelmed with this season, where coming into this, obviously Jeff Probst really hyped this season up as an all-time great one, and so far it just feels kind of in line with the new era. I mean, probably better than 41 and 43, but probably in line with 42, which I didn't love 42 as much as most people. So it's kind of just okay for me so far. I mean, obviously we do have these really great characters like Carolyn and Jam Jam. I thought Matthew was a lot of fun. Franny and Matt are really likable, but like as a whole, nothing's really standing out too much to me here. And I feel like this season really feels like this continued boredom of this new era, where it really just feels like we're getting another season that is mostly similar. And like, yes, we are getting like the birdcage. Yes, we are getting this really weird one-person swap, but those aren't things that really fix the fundamental issues here. And I think the 3-tribe format again has just gotten really stale, especially with no proper swap. And even though they did this one-person swap, which I probably like more than most people, it still feels like something that is just a worse version of just doing a normal swap. And really just in general, I just struggle to really care about this season. I mean, straight up, this is the season of the new era that I'm probably the least invested in what's going on here, where I really haven't been following Edgic as closely as I have been. I really haven't been following the online community or listening to podcasts about Survivor 44 as much as I normally do. And to a fair factor into that is the fact that we just had Australian Survivor, we have BB Can 11 going on. I just finished work on the most ridiculously long video I've ever made, which will be coming out in a few months. Like, I've had other things on my mind, but just for some reason this season hasn't really been fully clicking with me, even though, again, I do like some of these characters, and we did get some pretty fun vote outs. I thought the premiere had a really chaotic tribal there. I did think the Sarah boot was really fun, but as a whole I've really just struggled to really connect to this season. I don't fully know why exactly that is the case, but I still think there is potential for this season. And with how much Jeff hypes up this season, I'm assuming we're going to get something special in the post-merge. But as of right now, I'm kind of just fine with this season. But with that, let's start talking about the booted players so far, starting off with Bruce, who obviously was medevac from the game, which I will say coming in to the premiere, I was pretty spoiled on Bruce getting medevac. Mind you, it did not happen the way I thought it would, where I thought he would be instantly medevaced at the initial challenge, as again, there's a shot of him in the trailer that you can tell is him. So I was like, okay, Bruce is probably getting medevaced right away. But then he actually ended up going back to camp to where I was like, oh, maybe he's not going to get medevaced, and then he gets medevaced anyway. And again, there's not really much to say about Bruce. Like, we know that he did get the invitation to come back to play again by Jeff Probst. So, again, he's probably on 45 or 46. We'll probably be able to assess him more there. But as of right now, again, not really much to say, but again, pretty happy to see him get another chance. Next up, we'll talk about Maddie, who is such a weird first boot in my eyes. Maddie is a player that seemed to be effective in what she was trying to do. She did end up orchestrating this first vote against Brandon, and while not everyone was on board, it did seem like if this was a situation where everyone was going to vote, Brandon probably would have been voted out. However, obviously there are these wonky circumstances of both Jamie and Matt playing their shot in the darks, and then Lauren giving up her vote for an extra vote, and then also Brandon using his idol to idol her out of the game that ends up completely messing up her plan. However, I think she's the only first boot in Survivor history that's actually been able to execute a plan that would have gone through had it not been for an idol. I mean, she's the only first boot to get idol out of the game. So in like looking back at my first boot ranking, I mean, Maddie would be very, very high on that. However, she's also a person that created a plan that caused her to be voted out. I mean, really, the entire basis of her plan of her trying to blindside Brandon, who has an idol in his pocket, is ridiculous to begin with when you're not going to split the vote. So while, again, it seemed like she was a very effective player, she also causes her own demise, which is a very humorous storyline for her. And kind of exactly how I expected her story to play out based on the preseason. Next up, moving on to Helen, and she was there. I really didn't get much from her. I'll say in the preseason, by the time of the premiere, I actually changed my winner pick from Claire to Helen, which is funny considering they were literally booted back to back. But again, I did see a lot of potential in Helen in the preseason. I thought she could have been this Erica-like figure in the game, and no, she's just booted right away. And again, I don't feel like she got much content of substance. I mean, I feel like I know very little about her. Even in her boot episode, it felt like it mostly revolved around Carolyn and Carson, with Carson seeming to vote her out because he got a wrong read from her, which is weird. But again, there's not really much to say about Helen. It was just largely fine. But that would move on to Claire, who was my official winner pick, and I am genuinely shocked that Claire was an early boot. I mean, coming into this, I really thought Claire would be pretty locked in for at least early merge. And to be fair, I did expect Claire to be probably a little bit more physical. I expect her to be like this clear outlier on the tribe of being looked at as the weakest, though at the same time, this all did seem kind of fluky. I mean, like, obviously, yeah, she decided to sit out of every challenge, and that's kind of bad. But, like, in reality, it seemed more so like an excuse to vote her out than, like, the actual reason. But again, I really like Claire. I thought she seemed to have some good strategic thoughts. I did like her talking to Matthew on the bench. That was good. I do think with that, it does bring us to a big talking point of this pre-merge, that for the second time in a row now, we have a pre-merge mostly comprising of women being voted off. Now, obviously, last time it was 4 out of the 5. This time it's literally the 4 people that were actually voted out of the game were all women, which is definitely a worrying trend here. I think last time I really owned it up to a fluke. However, now that's happened 2 seasons in a row, I do think it is definitely a worrying trajectory for Survivor, and that these 3 tribes are obviously making people feel incentivized to keep around physical strength, especially with them thinking that a swap is not going to happen, which again just really makes the gameplay super dull on what is already a pretty dull format of 3 tribes, where to me it's like the format of 3 tribes has always been beneficial, not because of the actual 3 tribes initially, but more so because when they eventually come together, there's not going to be this very clear majority. There is going to be a lot of intermingling because they're forced to, because there's no outright majority. Or I feel like the way that the show is presenting this 3-tribe format now is as if these 3 tribes are actually fundamentally good, which I think is a misunderstanding of the overall format. As again, I just think it leads to boring vote-offs, but even beyond that, now it's leading to even more predictable vote-offs, and that's just the younger women that are deemed not physically strong being voted out. Mind you, I will say that again, like the Maddie situation's obviously a bit strange. Even the Sarah vote-off is a bit strange as well, though again, like the fact that we've had 2 seasons in a row where only 1 guy has been voted out pre-merge is definitely a trend that we have to take into consideration now. But next up, let's go ahead and talk about Sarah, who was there. I will say I was mind blown looking at the confessional count, where Sarah is in the top half of confessional getters, having somehow gotten 17 confessionals. And with that, I don't think I can tell you a single thing about Sarah. I feel like none of her content had any real substance to it. It all felt like content that was either situational, whether that be through going on the journey or through her being on the bottom. Like, I really just feel like I couldn't tell you a single thing about her, and it never felt like any of her content was actually necessary content, which is largely why I never really thought of her as someone in winner contention throughout her run. But I do think she goes out in a pretty interesting way here. Obviously, we do have this entire one-person swap situation, which is essentially production swap screwing 1 player from each tribe, but then also giving them an idol, which I don't personally mind that much, as essentially it does the opposite. It's not even necessarily screwing over the person that swaps now, it's more so screwing over the people that don't swap. But through that, I think the people that don't swap at least have more options in how to navigate through the game. I actually don't mind this, even though it does feel obviously manufactured. And Sarah being idoled out here with a fake idol that she thought was real in her pocket is a pretty funny outcome for her story. Though again, I just feel like she's a character that, despite us seeing a lot of her, I just never felt like we saw anything of true substance from her. To where while I think there's probably a potentially decent player in her, I don't feel like she made the greatest TV. Now for the final person we have to talk about here, which is sadly Matthew, which obviously sucks to lose him this way. Again, what was he doing climbing that rock? For him to injure his shoulder from the very beginning and then eventually have to quit due to his injury just kind of sucks. to the point where I was actually genuinely surprised on Jeff Probst's podcast that he didn't formally invite Matthew for another season like he did with Bruce. But obviously, it's just an underwhelming outcome to Matthew's season. I mean, it's one where Matthew was a top contender for me throughout his entire run. While he was never number one in my estimations, particularly due to the fact that he was kind of undermining the premiere, like, I did have him in the top 3 for the last few episodes, him being number 2 coming into this episode. However, realistically, I do think Matthew, if he were to survive, I would have expected him to be someone that probably is like the Shan of the season, someone that gets booted around Final 7, Final 8, never really the true winner. But still, it's like, I mean, I am definitely underwhelmed with the fact that he's now gone. I think he was one of the bigger characters of the season. I think he was playing the game in one of the most interesting ways here. And I think Matthew is a very innovative player. I do like these like very minute strategies that he was using that seemed to be working. Things like using a shot in the dark to not end up having to vote to kind of conceal where he lands in the game. I like the planting of a fake idol and leading a specific person to it so that he can build a relationship with that person. Like, I think there are good ideas there with Matthew to where I definitely would like to see him play again, though at the same time, I don't know how well it would go if people have the knowledge that he is willing to do these sort of things. But Matthew's someone that I was definitely disappointed to see booted this early. Definitely was someone that I was hoping would make a deep run and be propped up as a big player, though obviously it just gets cut short. So that's all the pre-merge boots. Now let's get on to the actual proper mid-season power ranking, where here we are 12 players to rank. Again, I'm going to be ranking them based on how likely I feel like they are to win the game based on the edit of the season. So let's start off at number 12, where for me the bottom 2 here are pretty definitive. I think these are 2 people that I really do not see winning the game in any way. However, we're going to be starting that off with a person that has been getting content on their show. I just think none of it has been good content. And even beyond that, there seems to be content that's kind of being left out to make her look even worse. And that person is Jamie. And for me, again, Jamie has a very strange edit here. And the fact that, again, she is getting content. She is on their show. It's just that it feels like there's never a point where her content is propping her up. Like, she seems to be really excited to be there. She seems to be willing to take these risks that the show props up. How we constantly see her getting undermined. I mean, just in this last episode, we had her talking about how much she loves the Soka tribe, only for that to be followed up by her being undermined by her trying to work with Matt not wanting to work with her, and then her telling Franny about Matt, only for her to say that Jamie doesn't know what's going on, and her going to Matt and telling her this information. Again, all this was really bad, just completely undermining her there. And even in the previous episode, we see the entire tribe plotting against her and digging through her bag for an idol. So I think that undermines that message as well. We do also have the premiere, where I did think she had decent content at the very beginning, but then her entire Shot in the Dark story comes off very bizarre, to where it really doesn't get explained why she's playing the Shot in the Dark. It just makes her look extremely paranoid, when in reality it turns out she had a reason to play the Shot in the Dark. We've learned through Exit Press that she actually was the target initially, and that her using the Shot in the Dark actually turned votes away from her. However, the fact that the show turns what could have been a good move from her into her looking paranoid for no reason is also a massive indictment on her winning chances here. And then when also adding in the fact that she gets tricked by Matthew, to where immediately afterwards Matthew seems really dismissive of their relationship, kind of mocking her plant lady nickname. Like, I just feel like there really is nothing positive about her edit outside of her overall energy. Like, I think she is a very likable person, but I think in terms of her actual edit, there's nothing really there of substance. It feels like she's constantly undermined every single time she's on their show, and because of that, for me, I just feel like there's no real chance for her to win here, and she's here at number 12. Now, number 11, we're moving on to probably the person that most people expected to be at the very bottom, and here we do have Josh. And Josh is the same thing. Again, Josh has also gotten a really bad edit. To be honest, probably even more so openly bad, to where the only reason Josh is above Jamie for me is because I feel like Josh has at least gotten more solid personal content in this last episode. We also see his relationship with Jam Jam, and while I'm assuming that's going to turn negative following this, like, at least he's gotten these like really big personal moments for him. However, in reality, again, Josh is also not winning the game. Again, he was near invisible for first half of the pre-merge. I mean, he got a few meaningless confessionals early on, but again, that was really nothing of substance. Wasn't shown again until the Claire boot, where at that point he was pretty undermined, and people talking about how much much they did not trust him. He was a potential target there. Probably the most damning thing is the fact that he talks about how well positioned he is in the tribe, that he's in the middle, only for us to then see the entire tribe agree to vote him out next. They also have these pretty big dodo moments for him of him making this fake idol and Jam breaking it and just mocking him confessional over it. That's really funny. You have his lying of being a doctor and Sarah calling him out for it. Again, like, he is not winning this game. I mean, this is just way too much negative content, way too much undermining for him to win. Though, again, I feel like there's at least some really solid personal content there that kind of elevates him at least one spot. But realistically, where I actually see Josh's game going is I think he is one of two contenders for the merge boot in my eyes. I do think Josh or a certain other player that we'll talk about eventually are the most likely merge boots. I think based on how the story seems to be set up, I am expecting the underestimated players to eventually group together at the merge and then take out the bro-y guys that are underestimating them, with Josh seeming to be one of those people. Where I think a major theme across this season is how underestimated some of the key players are. I really people like a Carolyn, a Carson, a Matt, a Heidi, like all these players have this like storyline of how underestimated they can be, and I could see these players at the merge coming together to flip the game on the bro-y guys. I feel like Josh seems like a very easy first target for them, mainly because he doesn't really seem to have any real relationships just in general. But even then, the end of this episode is literally Carolyn talking about how much she is upset that she wasn't able to get rid of Josh, and I felt like that very much felt like foreshadowing to her being able to do so in the following episode. So I do feel like Josh is a very likely next boot, but even if he isn't, it's like, where's he really going in the game? And also the edit's fully not backing him up, so I still have him here at number 11. Now number 10, and this might be a shock to some people because I see people in the Edge community really rating this person pretty high, usually around like number 5 or so. However, I just do not see it. I do not see how this person is winning the game based on that he's given, and that person is Danny. Where to me, Danny is clearly being set up as a big player, but not one that's gonna win. I mean, I think at this point, maybe he is in the Shan spot of maybe like final 8, final 9-ish boots, where obviously Danny is being set up as the big player on Soka, the one that has the idols, is tricking people into finding the fake idol, seems to be running the tribe strategically, yet his overall edit is very wonky. Again, he gets almost nothing in the premiere, and his edit only spikes up when he finds an idol, a situation that is completely necessary for the story. And even then, he doesn't really even get personal content until very recently. However, along the way here, he's being undermined. We have the situation of him digging through the bag, where after that, he openly says that he doesn't think Jamie has an idol, which we know that Jamie has an idol. Then in this last episode, we have this conversation with Brandon, which is just seemingly idiotic. Like, I really don't get what they were doing. Like, are they really just that confident that Carolyn's going to be the boot? Like, that just seems extremely ridiculous that they're openly talking about creating an alliance that doesn't include her right in front of her. Like, I think that made them come off as idiots as well. Like, for me, there's nothing good about Danny's edit in my eyes, outside the fact that he's being portrayed as a big player, but that's really nothing of substance for a potential winner. I mean, for me, it's like everything here screams out as like mid-merge boot. Now, again, I don't think he's necessarily going to be the merge boot. I think there's other people that seem more primed for that position, but I would not be that surprised if he's booted not too long after that. To where, again, he really feels like the main player that is in opposition of this overall theme of the season, this theme of being underestimated, where he seems like the boss for that theme and that these players are going to rally up against him, with him seeming to be set up as the leader of the opposite side. And again, with that and all of his undermining and also his lack of personal content until very recently, and also his lack of a premiere, I really just don't see why Danny is looked at pretty highly, and because that for me, he's here at number 10. Now number 9, the other person I think is very likely the merge boot. We do have Brandon. And again, for me, it's Josh or Brandon as the merge boot. I think these two people seem to be the most primed based on the edit, also based on, like, again, this overall storyline, where I do feel like this Danny-Brandon relationship is not going to work out for him, to where I do feel like Brandon is kind of being set up for a fall in this episode. However, Brandon's edit as a whole, I do think is slightly better than Danny's, where I think we are given more points where Brandon is unnecessary to the story, but he's still being shown. I think that entire segment about him being a Renaissance man, I thought was decent content content for him. I do get random confessionals from him at points. Like, I do feel like Brandon is at least there. Mind you, I think his premiere was extremely situational, where it felt entirely because he was the one to find the idol, and that's a lot of the reason why he gets like the biggest edit of the premiere. But then since then, he's been consistently getting at least like one confessional an episode. And really, as a whole, his edit does very much remind me of Danny from 41. Again, it was a very similar situation where Danny got a lot of situational content in the premiere due to him going on the journey, and then following that, he was just constantly there. And through that, like, again, Brandon can for sure be a person that makes it further in the game like Danny. However, I also feel like his edit is perfectly primed to be in the merge boot. Or again, typically the way the show is edited is that the merge episode is supposed to be this big episode, and the person that goes home in it is usually propped up slightly in the edit beforehand, being made slightly more present than what they probably would have normally been, and I feel like Brandon kind of perfectly fits within that. Now again, I don't think it's necessarily a full sure guarantee, as I do feel like Josh also kind of fits alongside that and also has this like Carolyn targeting Josh storyline that could directly lead to his downfall. But I do think Brandon is still also a very likely merge boot as well, and I don't really see Brandon winning this season. I think there's been enough undermining there to where that's not happening. Really, I think he's probably going to be tied to Danny, even if he isn't the merge boot here, to where they're probably going to meet their ends not too long after that. So Brandon's just someone I don't really think is winning either, even though some of his content has been pretty solid, but because of that, for me, he's here at number 9. Now, number 8, we're moving on to a player that just seems to be there, and I would not be surprised if this person has a major role moving forward, though as of right now, not really having much to do on the season. That person is Lauren. Now, Lauren is someone that I do think I would have completely ruled out had this not been the new era, an era of the show where it seems like the pre-merge doesn't seem to matter as much anymore, and it does seem like the post-merge is kind of where a person's winning storyline really starts to come through. However, usually that storyline still needs to be set up through the pre-merge. And while I would not be that surprised if, again, Lauren's edit post-merge definitely becomes a lot more prominent, I just feel like there's no real setup for Lauren. I don't know what Lauren's storyline is, to where we'll talk about the next few people that I think are also kind of in this ballpark, but at least with those people, I can tell you what their storyline is. I don't know what Lauren's storyline is. She's largely just there, not even being that present in the last few episodes. She did get decent content in episode 3, but even then her premiere was pretty bad, where she's kind of undermined there. And really, it's again, like Lauren for me, is just, I don't know what to really do with here. She's kind of being left kind of in the middle, or we're kind of past the people that I don't think for sure are going to win, and we're about to reach the people that I think at least still have a semblance of a chance of winning. Well, I feel like Lauren is just in the middle of that. She's just kind of there. Can she win? I mean, maybe if she starts to get some sort of storyline at the merge, but like, do I actually think it's going to happen? Not really. Especially just in general, Ratu seeming to be a tribe that at this point is being completely undermined by Carson's presence there, to where that also makes me lose a lot of faith in that tribe, to where I don't think someone from Ratu is winning, and because of that, for me, Lauren here is number 8. At number 7, the highest rated Ratu player somehow. I don't know how this happened, considering I was very low on this person for the first few episodes, but it does feel like his content is slightly getting better. And at number 7, I do have Kane. Now, again, do I think Kane's winning this game? No, I do not. I think while he has gotten good content at points, I do think that good content is also countered with him being undermined. I do think this episode in particular, like, he gets this bonding segment with Carson where they nerd out and everything. The problem is that Carson immediately then talks about how he's using the Ratus for information, and I think that completely undermines what could have been good content of him bonding with Carson. But again, at the end of the day, like, at least that's there. At least they're setting up a relationship there. However, at the end of the day, I also think that this is being set up because Carson's going to later betray Kane. And really, just in general, again, I do expect the Ratus to not be long for the game. I do think Carson is probably going to be their downfall based on how things are being portrayed. However, again, I think the main thing that sticks out to me with Kane is that he did get this really good content in episode 3. This moment of him wanting to be a hero for other people, and I think that is his main storyline here. Mind you, again, they got introduced in episode 3, which is not great. However, again, at least he has a storyline. At least there's something I can point to with Kane. Is that, okay, if he wins this season, that is his story. He is this guy that wants to inspire people, wants to be this hero for other people. That's at least the storyline. Is it a good one? No, it's not. He is not winning this game, but at least it's something. And because of that, for me, he's here at number 7. Now, number 6, again, from this point on, I think these are all people that can still legitimately win the game. I think these are people that I at least see a path for them to win. However, number 6 here is someone that I think if this person does win, we essentially need an Erica or a Gabler style edit. As again, I do think there are seeds to this person's edit, but they're not really this full form storyline just yet, and that person is Heidi. Now, I see a lot of talk online about like who is Heidi, and now I've seen from the Edge community that people are not particularly high on Heidi there. However, I do think Heidi is the type of player that could potentially have her edit completely turn around at the merge. Again, I thought she had a pretty solid premiere. It was a premiere where she ends up really detailing her storyline. She talks about how underestimated of a person she is and that she's going to surprise people. She makes the fire for the tribe, something that people were surprised by. And again, I do suspect that that is the overarching theme of this season, is that these underestimated players are going to end up running the game. And I do think Heidi perfectly fits within that storyline. Now, at the end of the day, again, I can't put her too high on this list because like outside that, there's not that much else of substance. Like obviously we've seen her relation with Danny. We've also seen her not like Josh, but really outside that, that's about it. Like there isn't that much substance to Heidi's edit outside that. However, I don't think we're at the point in Survivor where you need that. I do think in modern Survivor, again, I think all you need throughout the post-merge is a thematic storyline that is set up that will allow for that storyline to be continued on after the merge. However, I don't think the actual pre-merge edit is overall that relevant outside of like the main takeaway you get from your pre-merge. And I feel like Heidi's setup storyline there is one that I could see very much getting continued on post-merge and potentially give her this Erica style trajectory in the game. Now again, do I think she's the most realistic winner? No. I do think there's more of a chance of her winning than other people seem to. And I do think if her edit turns around at the merge, I do think there's a high possibility of her being within the top 3 by the time of next week. As of right now, with there being too many unknowns, I do still have her at number 6 here. Now, number 5, we're moving on to a player that I am largely conflicted on. I mean, to me, it's like, again, the Edge community does seem to look at this person as a top contender. I've never fully seen it, even though I think there are sprinkles of it there. And at number 5, I do have Frannie. And my biggest issue with Frannie is I feel like so much of her content is based around Matt. In a situation where the edit seems to very much indicate that Matt is going to outlast Frannie. Like there's so much talk about how this relationship with Matt is going to be Frannie's undoing. And while yes, we do see her trying to separate herself from Matt, it doesn't seem to actually be effective. And I do feel like it is that content that's always been sticking in my mind with Frannie, to where I just don't see her outlasting Matt. I think Matt is always going to outlast Frannie, which makes it very unlikely that she's going to win. However, I do think there's at least a semblance of a winning trajectory for her, which is her getting to the end with Matt. Where I do think if that is the case, where this entire storyline turns out to be wrong and that she gets to the end with Matt and wins against him, obviously I think that would be her winning story, but more than likely, I think she is getting booted before Matt, to where I just don't really see her getting to the end. Now, outside of that, I do think her edit is kind of solid, but even then, not really to a significant degree. I mean, yes, she is getting some pretty complex content. She's being portrayed as one of the better players from the Soka tribe. She also is one of the few people to get a Matt chat at the beginning of the season, which the eventual winner has been getting a Matt chat during that opening scene ever since the start of the new era. So like those are all good signs for Frannie. However, I really just feel like so much of her edit seems to be based around her relationship with Matt in a situation where the edit seems to foreshow her getting taken out because of Matt. So I just feel like at the end of the day, for me, not feeling too great about her, even though I can see a semblance of a storyline for a win, but I just don't fully believe in it. And because of that, for me, she's here at number 5. At number 4, we're moving on to a player that I was very high on after last episode. However, this episode was a little bit more perplexing to me. And this person is the person we've just been talking about, and that person's Matt. And again, for me, Matt's gotten a shockingly decent edit. Where coming into the season, I very much expected him to be kind of this doofusy sort of guy, this like Eric Reichenbach-esque figure that comes off very OTT at points. However, I think he's actually come off pretty well. I mean, like obviously we've seen this like storyline of like he's on the bottom and he's lost his vote and he is this kind of like Charlie Brown-esque character. I mean, he has gotten very good content in terms of his relationship with Frannie. Again, I feel like the edit is pointing to him outlasting Frannie. Well, also, he's gotten proven right at points. particularly when Danny looks through Jamie's bag for an idol and Danny says she doesn't have one. We then go out of our way to see Matt saying that he still thinks she does have one. Again, proving him right there. We also get strong personal content for him with talking about how he just got out of a breakup, and it feels like the show is overall trying to make him a very sympathetic figure. However, there's also some more negative content to his edit. Mind you, I do think some of it was unavoidable, particularly in the fake idol situation, where that was one where, while it does make him come off kind of dumb, I don't feel like there's a way to stop that from being shown, where obviously they want to show the fake idol shenanigans, and I think you kind of have to portray him that way. However, this last episode, again, is very perplexing to me, to where it's one where we see him talk to Jamie, and Jamie talk about how aloof he is in the game, and then tells Franny about this, which leads to Franny obviously mocking Jamie, which I think you would think that, oh, that means that this is good for Matt, that Jamie was wrong, and that Matt actually is getting good content, but then we never truly get this turnaround to benefit Matt. There's not really a point where, like, Franny says, oh, but she's wrong. Matt isn't this aloof player. Instead, it's more so her saying, oh, but I'm close to Matt and I want to keep Matt around. And it's like, it's not really the type of content that you would expect to rebound Matt in that situation, to where I don't know how to really interpret this last episode. I do think it is largely mixed in my eyes. I do feel like it was definitely not a great sign, the fact that everyone does see him as this aloof player. And while, again, this overall storyline of the season being underestimated players eventually take control of the game, I do feel like Matt could play into that, but I do feel like there's a bit more worry now, to where that leaves me a bit mixed on his edit as a whole. But again, there are these glimpses of positivity there. I do think his premiere, again, was pretty strong as a whole. I do think his story seems to be one of the more consistent ones across the season, and I could see him eventually playing into the season's themes as well. So I think there's a lot to like here, and because of that, for me, he's here number 4. Now number 3, and if you can't tell, the top 3 are all the original Tika tribe, which is because in my mind, I think someone from Tika is almost definitely going to win. Now again, I think there's the off chance of someone like a Matt or a Heidi. However, truth be told, I do fully believe that Tika is the tribe that contains the winner. Now, obviously, the complex tribe theory is this Edgic theory within Survivor of that the tribe that gets the most complex and most set up storyline in the pre-merge ends up containing the winner for the post-merge. And while that hasn't necessarily been a theory that's fully worked out in recent seasons, I think there's no denying to me that Tika is the complex tribe here. I mean, Tika is by far the tribe that seems to be set up through and through. I think each of its individual members are 3 of the biggest stars of the show. I think we're being shown a lot of their perspective on the show. I also feel like they're all being set up as rootable underdog figures that feel like they're being set up to play into this theme of these underdogs that are underestimated and take control of the game. Like, I feel like that is what the story of this season is going to be. And because I think the 3 Tika members are in the game are the most likely to win the game. However, the order here is what is debatable. However, at number 3 here, I'm going to go with someone that I think, while his recent content has been stronger than the person in my number 2 spot, I do feel like there is some negativity looming with this person that leaves him at number 3. And because at number 3, I do have Carson. And Carson, for me, is a player that I thought he had a very good premiere. I think he's had a pretty good last 2 episodes. However, episodes 2 and 3 were pretty bad for Carson. To where, again, like for me, it's like after the premiere, I feel like he essentially got everything you would want him to get. He got personal content, he got strategic content, he set up the initial power structure on the Tika tribe. He really got everything you would want from like a perfect winner edit standpoint, even though I don't think we're at the point in Survivor history where that really would eventually lead to a winner. But again, like everything is there in the premiere. However, then episode 2 comes around, and while he is being portrayed as the main decision maker for that vote, he also is shown to be wrong, where he talks about how he's going to target Helen because he thinks that Helen is lying about having an idol, something that he is outright wrong about. I mean, that's undermining him there. And in episode 3, I thought was even more damning, where he tries to repair a relationship with Sarah and says to Sarah that, and talks about his confidence that he's won Sarah over, only for Sarah to then talk about how she doesn't trust Carson, which again completely undermines him there. Again, that's 2 episodes in a row of him being undermined in a way that felt largely unnecessary. But then episode 4 comes around, he gets swapped over, and I think he gets good content in his relationship with Matthew. Mind you, Matthew's gone, which is not great. But yeah, I thought he got decent content there, and I think in this last episode he got really great content in his relationship with Kane. To where, again, once again, I think he's being set up to be the downfall for Rat 2, and using this information against them in the post-merge, while also playing into the themes of being underestimated. He openly says that people don't look at him as the mastermind. Well, I assume the indications that he actually is. But again, I think he perfectly fits into the themes of the season. So again, I think that's all very good for Carson, along with the fact that while he has been undermined episodes 2 and 3, we've seen in recent Survivor seasons that doesn't matter that much anymore. This like pre-merge undermining, as we've seen the likes of Gabler get undermined in the pre-merge, Marianne got undermined in the pre-merge, Erica got undermined in the pre-merge. Like in reality, I feel like again, like as long as that thematic storyline is there for the pre-merge and the post-merge picks up off that, I don't think a lot of this like minor negativity in the pre-merge matters that much. To where again, I think Carson can for sure still win the game. He is still the least likely of the original Tika members, though still really strong content through and through, because for me, he's here number 3. Now number 2, and for a lot of the season, this top 2 was switched around. I've had these people 1 and 2 for a lot of the season, so I do feel like the recent content from this player has really knocked him down. And at number 2, I do have Jam Jam. And for me, Jam Jam was number 1 for episodes 1, 2, and 3. I was very high on Jam Jam at the very beginning. I feel like Jam Jam got as good of a premiere as I would have wanted him to get. And while he does come off as this really OTT character, I do feel like he got very strong content in that premiere. He got very strong personal content, talking about how he's used to conditions because he comes from Puerto Rico, and also got minor strategic content and him seeming to be close to Carolyn that obviously got backed up on in episode 2. We also have him getting Matt chat at the beginning of the season, something that, again, only him and Franny of the people left in the game had, which is probably a decent sign for them considering the recent trend of people that have Matt chats go on to win the game. Also, something that not only boosts up Jam Jam's winning potential, but I think really just in general the Tika members, is when Bruce gets medevaced. We literally have it subtitled what Jam Jam says there, in that we're going to win this for you, which I just felt like blatant foreshadowing there. I think it's very clear to me that, again, Tika is being set up for a win. And I think another interesting aspect of all this too is the fact that when Matthew gets medevaced in this latest episode, instead of seeing Ratu's reaction to this, we see Tika's reaction to this, particularly Jam Jam in confessional talking about it, which that part of it felt really unnecessary. To where, again, I don't know if this could be like set up of maybe Jam Jam gets medevaced later in the game and that's why he's being connected to these medevacs, but also can be looked at as pretty strong content there. However, again, I think the issue with Jam Jam is his last few episodes, where episode 4 in particular was pretty much just all bad. Everything with his handling of Carolyn, everything with his handling of his relationship with Josh, how he was openly shown to be wrong, like all that was really, really bad. However, I think his last episode was, again, a bit more mixed. I mean, he was definitely the main character of this last episode. He got the most confessionals. He gets this like relationship segment with Josh, even though it's kind of being set up as one that's probably going to break apart down the road. We have him calling out Josh's idol, mocking him in confessional. And even beyond that, I feel like there's a lot of scenes in this episode that, while they are moments where I think you can call out Jam Jam, I don't think that's the way this show portrays it. Where I've seen this talk online where people are saying that, oh, the fake idol thing is bad for Jam Jam because he actually believed that first. And it's not until Carolyn mentioned that they should see it that Jam Jam doesn't believe it. Where it's like, that's not the way the show portrays it. Like, I do think a lot of the talk about Jam Jam's edit in this last episode seems to forego the overall intentionality more so than the practicality. Well, I think practically, yes, you can call out these things about Jam Jam that made this last episode look negative for him. However, I don't think that was the intention of this last episode. I think fully they were trying to make Jam Jam turn around in this last episode as this more likable figure, as the smart player that picked up on how Josh is lying to him and that he can't trust Josh. However, again, the episode 4 though is really bad. However, again, I think it's one of these situations where post-merge, if his edit turns around, I don't think it'll matter as much based on the recent editing trends. However, I think another big thing for Jam Jam and why he's not in number 1 for me is the fact that I don't know what his story is. It's like he's gotten decent personal content. He's gotten decent game content at this point, but I don't know what his thematic storyline is, where he seems to be excited to be there and he's ready to play. But like, I feel like in terms of like this overall thematic storyline of being an underestimated player that ends up surprising people, Jam Jam doesn't seem to be that. We see that on the other tribes, that they seem to think of Jam Jam as the leader of the Tika tribe. Like, he doesn't really fit in with that storyline. And that's the main indictment to me, is that I don't know what his storyline is. Unlike Carson, who blatantly outlines that in the last episode. And unlike the number 1 pick that also blatantly has that storyline, Yam Yam doesn't. And I feel like that's obviously the big worry for me in terms of his winner edit, along with that negativity in episode 4. And that's a lot of the reason why he's here number 2. Now, number 1, the most likely winner for this season is pretty clearly Carolyn, who has really become the star of this season. I mean, the fact that we literally start the season on a confessional of her in the cold open is pretty indicative of that. And she's really been all over the show. I mean, she's been one of the biggest presences across the season. Mind you, I think she always would have been. I mean, she is such an outlandish character that I don't see how you don't show her on the show. But even within that, she's been given a decent amount of complexity. Like, she seems to be a very strong and active player to back that up. Where again, she seems to be the epitome of this storyline of this underestimated player that goes on to surprise people. And these last few episodes seem to really play into that. The fact that Yam Yam seemed to underestimate Carolyn, and that leads to Carolyn flipping on him and taking out Sarah. We have this last episode where it seems like Danny and Brandon seem to underestimate her, to the point where that leads to her deciding to flip on Josh in a way that the show seems to portray it as if Josh would have went home had it not been for Tribal. Also sets up her still continuing to want to take out Josh down the road, which, based on the way the edit is showing this, I do feel like she is going to be successful in that. Again, like, as a whole, I feel like Carolyn is the one that fits into this thematic storyline the best, while also just being the most present character there. Now, I will say that I do think there was some undermining in episode 1. She did get some like kind of Dodo-esque content, but even within that, I feel like they took the time to give us her strategic thinking throughout a lot of that. I will say that I think the one major sticking point for me with Carolyn is that while the thematic storyline is there, while her gameplay and character moments are there, like, she's very prominent on the show, I feel like the one thing that is lacking for me is that I would have liked more personal content, or I feel like her personal content on this season so far has been pretty bare bones, and I feel like that's a slight worry, though. When everything else about her edit is really, really strong, everything else plays into the overall themes of the season, also her being the major character of the season, I do feel like she is still the top contender, even though, again, I do worry about, is it too obvious? Is it too obvious that she is being set up for a potential win to where she won't? Is this more so like a Final Juror style edit, of a journey edit that ends up being taken out right before the very end? I do feel like there's potential of that as well. But no matter what, I think she's being set up to be the main character of this season, and not in like a Shan sort of way, to where I feel like with Shan there was a lot more blatant red flags early on to me than there is with Carolyn, to where I don't expect Carolyn to be a boot in that nature. Like, I don't expect her to be like a Final 7, Final 8 boot. I think she more than likely is making the very end of the game. Probably going to succeed in creating this alliance of underestimated players that is able to take control of the game. It's just a matter of whether she can get to the very, very end by that point, which I think is a bit more questionable. But as of right now, I do think she is by far the most likely winner of the bunch, the player that has been undermined the least, while also been the most prominent on the show, while also has been given a direct connection to the season's main thematic storyline, and because that, for me, she's here number 1. But there we go. I mean, that is my mid-season power ranking for Survivor 44. Now, moving forward, I'll obviously end up doing a review for the season, followed by a player ranking like I've done with every other recent season of the show. Also coming up, I do have my player ranking for Australian Survivor, Heroes vs. Villains. That should be the next video on the board, followed by the mid-season power ranking for BB Can 11. So we got a lot coming up. Also, if you want to hear my thoughts on the rest of the season as it's going along, you can catch me at Twitch at twitch.tv/TheMarine where I'll be live at 11 p.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday and Sunday, so you can catch me there. But beyond that, just expect more of the same style of content you can expect from the channel. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.